Professor Ixel stood before the curved window of the Galactic Archives restricted wing, his iridescent scales reflecting the light of 3 moons. Behind him, 22 of the most promising xenology students from across the known systems waited in uncomfortable silence. They represented 17 different species, yet shared the same expression of nervous anticipation. "What I'm about to show you," Xilax began, his translator converting his natural clicks into smooth universal standard, "has been classified under the Omega Protocol for the past 42 cycles." He turned to face his students, noting how the Vaporin in the front row had condensed slightly, a sign of anxiety in her gaseous species. The professor pressed his palm against the biolock, and the Archive's quantum displays hummed to life. "You've all studied the Galactic Non-Participation Decree of 2847. You know that humans are banned from participating in any military action beyond their solar system. But none of your textbooks explain why." A Meridian student raised 3 of his eye stalks. "Professor, isn't it because their technology is too primitive? The historical records show they barely achieved FTL travel when the decree was issued." Xilax's scales shifted to a deep blue, a sign of amused irony among his kind. "That's what most believe. It's also precisely what the Council wanted everyone to believe." He gestured at the quantum displays, which now showed Earth from orbit. "Tell me, what do you see?" "A Class 4 death world," answered a crystalline being from the back row, their facets glittering as they spoke. "High gravity, extreme temperature variations, aggressive fauna, unpredictable weather patterns." "Correct," Xilax said. "Now tell me, what kind of species survives on such a world, let alone becomes dominant?" The room fell silent. The professor activated another display, showing historical footage of human civilization. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived. While most species evolved to find niches and achieve harmony with their environments, humans adapted their environment to suit them. The footage showed scenes of human history, cities rising from deserts, settlements in the Arctic, underwater habitats, and space stations. But that's not why they're banned from galactic warfare. The real reason. He paused, his scales shifting to a solemn gray. The real reason begins with the incident at Proxima Station. The displays shifted to show security footage from a space station. The timestamp indicated it was from 42 cycles ago. The footage showed a diplomatic gathering, representatives from dozens of species mingling in the station's grand hall. "Watch carefully," Xilax instructed. "This is Admiral Kenna Walsh of the Human Defense Force, speaking with High Commander Vox of the Hegemony." The footage zoomed in on a human female in a simple blue uniform, speaking with a towering figure enclosed in crystalline armor. The audio crackled to life. "Your species is barely out of its gravity well," Vox's translated voice boomed. "Your ships are primitive, your weapons archaic. You have no place in galactic affairs." Admiral Walsh's response was quiet, but clear. "With respect, High Commander, perhaps you'd care to test that theory." Xilax paused the footage. This moment, this single conversation, led to the greatest paradigm shift in galactic military history. He looked at each student in turn. The Hegemony had won every significant military engagement for the past 1,000 cycles. Their quantum predictive engines could calculate and counter any known combat strategy. Their ships were operated by the most advanced AI in known space. He let the implications sink in before continuing. They accepted Admiral Walsh's challenge, expecting to teach humanity a harsh lesson about their place in the galaxy. Instead, his scales rippled with remembered anxiety. Instead, they learned why species that evolve on death worlds are different. Why humans, specifically, think about warfare in ways that terrified the entire galactic community. The Vaporin student had condensed even further. "But Professor, what could they possibly have done?" The Hegemony's technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. Xilax's scales shifted to deep crimson, the color of profound warning. "That, young ones, is exactly what the Hegemony thought. They failed to understand that technology alone doesn't win wars. They failed to grasp that a species that survived on a death world does so by breaking rules that other species consider immutable. He reactivated the displays, showing the massive hegemony fleet assembling for what they thought would be a simple demonstration of superiority. Next time, we'll examine exactly what happened when the most advanced military force in the galaxy encountered something their quantum engines couldn't predict: human ingenuity. The professor's scales settled into a pattern that none of his students had ever seen before, one that spoke of both fascination and deep, primal fear. And you'll understand why the Council decided that keeping humans out of galactic warfare wasn't about protecting humanity. It was about protecting everyone else. The next session began with Professor Zulax activating a hologram of the hegemony's flagship, the Infinite Calculation. The quantum displays showed the vessel in all its glory: 17 kilometers of crystalline alloys and quantum processors, more like a floating city than a warship. The hegemony, Zulax began, his scales shifting to a scholarly bronze, had never lost a military engagement. Their quantum engines could process every possible combat scenario in microseconds. They had deemed humanity's challenge amusing at best. The displays shifted to show the human vessels, where the hegemony ships were elegant crystalline structures. The Earth ships looked almost crude in comparison: blocky, utilitarian designs with visible weapon hardpoints and armor plating. The humans were permitted 3 vessels for the demonstration, Zulax continued. They chose their oldest ships, ones they called retrofitted. This decision caused much amusement among the hegemony's commanders. A Meridian student raised an eye stalk. They used outdated ships against the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. Was this some form of suicide? Zulax's scales rippled with dark amusement. That's exactly what everyone thought. But watch this recording from the pre-engagement diplomatic meeting. The display showed Admiral Walsh sitting across from High Commander Vox in the neutral ground of Proxima Station. Other alien diplomats and military observers lined the walls, eager to witness what they assumed would be humanity's humiliation. "Your ships are antiques," Vox's translated voice carried clear disdain. "Our quantum engines have already calculated every possible outcome. There are 0 scenarios where you achieve victory." Walsh's response was unexpected. She smiled. "That's fascinating, High Commander. We didn't bother with simulations. Instead, we spent the week teaching our crew to play jazz." The recording showed the confusion rippling through the assembled aliens. Zulax paused the playback. "None of us understood the significance then. The hegemony's translators couldn't even find a proper equivalent for jazz in any known language." He activated another display, showing the human crews preparing for battle. Instead of running combat drills or checking weapon systems, they were gathered in their ship's common areas, listening to music and discussing what appeared to be ancient Earth military history. The hegemony's observers reported this behavior as proof of human incompetence. Zulax continued. They didn't understand they were watching something unprecedented in galactic military history, a species that treated warfare as an art rather than a science. The quantum displays showed the final preparations. The hegemony fleet arranged itself in mathematically perfect formations, their quantum engines humming as they calculated every possible permutation of the coming battle. The 3 human ships simply waited, maintaining loose positions that seemed almost random. The terms were simple, Zulax explained. A demonstration of fleet combat capabilities using training weapons, energy markers that would register hits without causing actual damage. The first side to achieve what humans called a mission kill on the opposing flagship would be declared the victor. The professor's scales shifted to a deep violet, the color of imminent revelation. But before the demonstration began, Admiral Walsh made a request that should have warned us. She asked that the engagement be broadcast live across all galactic channels. A crystalline student chimed in confusion. But that would mean everyone would witness their defeat. Why would they want that? Zulax's scales rippled with remembered anxiety. The hegemony assumed the same thing, that humans wanted to demonstrate their commitment to galactic participation even in defeat. They didn't realize that humans wanted witnesses for a very different reason. The displays showed the final moments before engagement. High Commander Vox made one last communication. For the sake of diplomacy, we will attempt to make this quick and relatively painless. Admiral Walsh's response would later be studied in every military academy in the galaxy. "Oh, please don't hold back, Commander. We came here to put on a show. It would be a shame to disappoint our audience." That's when some of us began to worry, Zylax said softly. Not because we thought humans might win. That seemed impossible. We worried because they weren't acting like a species about to face defeat. They were acting like artists about to take the stage. The professor's scales shifted to deep crimson. The hegemony's quantum engines had calculated every possible military strategy, every known tactic, every documented maneuver. But they couldn't calculate what they couldn't conceive of. And no species in the galaxy had ever conceived of treating space combat as a form of improvisational art. He looked at his students, noting their mixture of anticipation and disbelief. "Next time, we'll examine the battle itself. And you'll learn why the galaxy's most advanced predictive computers proved worse than useless against a species that had spent its entire history learning to thrive in chaos." The quantum displays showed the final image. 3 small human ships facing a vast fleet of crystalline vessels. In retrospect, Zylax reflected, it looked less like a military engagement and more like the opening scene of what humans would call a performance. And like many in the audience that day, he still remembered the moment he realized that was exactly what it was meant to be. The lights in the archive's restricted wing dimmed as Professor Zylax activated the full holographic recreation of the battle. The students found themselves seemingly floating in space, surrounded by the opposing fleets. The battle began, Zylax narrated, his scales pulsing with remembered tension, exactly as the hegemony's quantum engines predicted. Their fleet moved in perfect geometric formations, their targeting solutions precise to the microsecond. The massive crystalline ships advanced like a synchronized dance, their formations creating overlapping fields of fire that would theoretically make evasion impossible. The 3 human vessels, designated Starkiller, Nightwind, and Wayfarer, remained motionless. High Commander Vox opened a channel to offer one final chance for surrender, Zylax continued. Admiral Walsh's response changed modern military doctrine forever. The audio crackled through the holographic space. "Thank you for the offer, Commander. But we're about to begin. Hit it, Nightwind." What happened next caused several students to instinctively dodge. The human ships suddenly blasted music through all communication channels, ancient Earth music full of wailing instruments and unpredictable rhythms. Then they moved. "Jazz," Zylax explained, his scales shifting to analytical green, a form of music based on improvisation and spontaneous collaboration. The humans weren't just playing it for psychological effect. They were using it to coordinate their movements. The 3 Earth ships broke apart in seemingly random directions, their movements following no recognizable pattern. The hegemony's quantum engines, programmed to predict and counter known tactics, began experiencing cascading errors. "Watch carefully," Zylax instructed. "The human ships aren't moving chaotically. They're responding to different elements of the music. Starkiller follows the bass line, Nightwind moves with the melody, and Wayfarer improvises like the solo instrument." The hologram showed the hegemony fleet's perfect formations beginning to break down as they tried to track the erratic human movements. Their targeting solutions, calculated to intersect with logical evasion patterns, consistently missed. "The quantum engines had a fundamental flaw," Zylax explained. "They were programmed to recognize patterns and predict outcomes. But humans weren't using patterns. They were deliberately avoiding them. Each ship's movements influenced the others in an ongoing improvisation that no computer could predict." The students watched in amazement as the 3 human ships began weaving through the hegemony's formation. The massive crystalline vessels, trying to maintain their calculated positions, began impeding each other's lines of fire. "Now observe the next phase," Zylax said, his scales darkening. This is when we learned why humans call warfare an art form. The human ships suddenly shifted tactics. Instead of evading, they began using the hegemony's own ships as shields, forcing the crystalline vessels to hold their fire to avoid hitting their allies. The jazz music shifted to something faster, more intense. The hegemony's commanders tried to regain control, Xilax continued. They ordered their ships to break formation and engage individually. It was exactly what the humans were waiting for. The hologram showed the hegemony fleet's perfect geometry dissolving into confusion. The moment they did, the three human ships converged from different directions, moving in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Admiral Walsh had studied ancient Earth naval battles, Xilax explained. She understood something the hegemony had forgotten. That space is three-dimensional, and that true chaos can be a weapon more powerful than any predictable pattern. The students watched as Starkiller suddenly cut its engines, spinning in place to fire in multiple directions while its momentum carried it through the hegemony formation. Nightwind used the gravitational fields of the larger ships to slingshot itself into impossible positions. Wayfarer seemed to dance between enemy vessels, making shots that curved around obstacles in ways the quantum engines had calculated as mathematically impossible. The human ships were scoring hits that the hegemony's computers insisted couldn't exist. Xilax said. Their targeting solutions weren't based on calculations. They were based on intuition, instinct, and what humans call feeling the rhythm. The hologram reached its climax as all three human ships converged on the infinite calculation from different vectors. The hegemony flagship, its quantum engines overwhelmed by conflicting data, tried to predict all possible attack angles simultaneously. Instead, it predicted none of them. The killing stroke, Xilax said softly, came from a direction that existed in none of the hegemony's combat databases, straight up relative to the galactic plane. Because humans, unlike our quantum engines, understood that in space, concepts like up and down are purely subjective. The students watched as training markers blazed across the infinite calculations hull, registering a mission kill. The massive flagship, pride of the hegemony fleet, had been defeated by three obsolete human ships moving to the rhythm of ancient Earth jazz. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds, Xilax concluded, his scales showing a complex pattern of awe and unease. In that time, humanity didn't just defeat the hegemony. They proved that our entire understanding of warfare was fundamentally flawed. The professor deactivated the hologram, leaving the students floating in stunned silence. Next time, he said, we'll examine the immediate aftermath and why this demonstration caused the greatest military panic in galactic history. His scales shifted to the deep crimson of warning. Because what truly terrified the Galactic Council wasn't that humans had won. It was that they had done so while visibly enjoying themselves. And nothing is more frightening than a species that treats warfare as a form of art. Professor Xilax activated the archive's quantum displays once again, showing the immediate aftermath of the battle. His scales had taken on a deep indigo, the color of profound historical significance. The silence that followed the battle, he began, was unlike anything the galactic community had ever experienced. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds had watched three primitive human ships dismantle the most advanced fleet in known space, but no one could agree on what they had actually witnessed. The displays showed emergency sessions erupting across every major world. Military analysts, strategic AI systems, and the greatest tactical minds in the galaxy all tried to explain what had happened. None succeeded. The hegemony's response was particularly telling, Xilax continued, bringing up footage from their high command. Their first action was to check their quantum engines for malfunctions. When none were found, they experienced what humans would call an existential crisis. The students watched as hegemony scientists pored over battle footage, trying to decode the patterns in the human ship's movements. A Vaporin student partially condensed in realization. They're still trying to find patterns that don't exist, aren't they? Exactly, Xylax confirmed. The hegemony couldn't accept that the humans weren't using any discernible pattern. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that everything in the universe could be reduced to mathematical certainty. Humans had just proven that belief false. The displays shifted to show Admiral Walsh's post-battle interview. She sat calmly, still in her battle uniform, looking more like someone who had just finished a pleasant performance than a military commander who had revolutionized warfare. "We just played to our strengths," her recorded voice explained. "Every human child knows that the best way to win a game is to change the rules. We simply applied that principle to space combat." This statement, Xylax noted, his scales rippling with remembered anxiety, sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The idea that warfare could be treated as a game, that military engagement could be approached with creative joy rather than mathematical precision, was more than disturbing. It was revolutionary. The professor brought up classified footage from an emergency council session. Representatives from hundreds of species argued frantically about the implications of what they had witnessed. The true panic, Xylax explained, began when military analysts started examining human history. They discovered that this approach, treating warfare as a creative endeavor, wasn't new. Humans had been fighting this way for their entire history. The displays showed ancient Earth battles, commanders using unexpected tactics, forces adapting to chaos, victories achieved through innovation rather than superior force. What terrified the Council wasn't just that humans could fight this way. Xylax continued, his scales darkening. It was that they had been doing it for thousands of years on their death world, treating survival itself as an art form. Every human was, in effect, a practical expert in creative problem-solving under lethal conditions. A crystalline student chimed in concern. But surely after analyzing the battle, countermeasures could be developed. Xylax's scales shifted to a complex pattern indicating grim amusement. That's what everyone thought. The hegemony's best minds spent months developing new quantum prediction algorithms. They created what they believed was a perfect counter-strategy for human combat techniques. He paused, letting anticipation build. When they proudly announced their solution, Admiral Walsh's response was simply, "That sounds fun. We'll try something completely different next time." The displays showed the growing panic as the implications set in. The hegemony's quantum engines, the most advanced computers ever created, had been rendered effectively useless, not because they were flawed, but because humans approached warfare in a way that made prediction itself meaningless. The Council faced an unprecedented situation, Xylax explained, a species that not only survived on a death world, but had turned the chaos of survival into an art form, a species that treated warfare not as a science to be mastered, but as a canvas for creative expression. His scales rippled with dark humor. One council member summed it up perfectly. How do you defend against an enemy whose greatest military asset is their ability to improvise joy from chaos? The professor looked at his students, noting their mixture of fascination and unease. Next time, we'll examine the council's final decision, and why they concluded that the only way to maintain galactic stability was to keep humans out of warfare entirely. He deactivated the displays, leaving only his bioluminescent scales providing light in the darkness. Because the most dangerous force in the universe isn't superior technology or advanced AI. It's a species that has learned to treat survival itself as an art form, and warfare as simply another medium for creative expression. Professor Xylax's scales shifted to the solemn gray of historical finality as he activated the archive's displays one last time. The quantum projections showed the Galactic Council's emergency session that would change the course of interstellar relations forever. The debate lasted 7 standard days, Xylax began. For the first time in Council history, every single member species agreed on one thing. Humans represented something unprecedented in galactic civilization. The displays showed the council chamber, packed with representatives from across known space. At the center stood Admiral Walsh, still radiating the same calm confidence she had shown during the battle demonstration. The Council had three options, Xilax continued. First, accept humans as full military participants in galactic affairs. Second, attempt to contain them by force. Or third, find a diplomatic solution that would keep humanity's unique approach to warfare out of galactic conflicts. The professor brought up the classified threat assessment presented to the Council. The analysis was troubling. Given humanity's demonstrated ability to render predictive military technology useless, any attempt at forceful containment would likely fail. Worse, it might inspire humans to develop even more creative combat techniques. The recording showed various council members speaking. A hegemony representative warned that humans might share their artistic approach to warfare with other species, destabilizing millennia of established military doctrine. A Meridian diplomat pointed out that human improvisation could make future conflicts exponentially more devastating. But it was Admiral Walsh's final address to the Council that ultimately shaped their decision. Xilax said, activating that particular recording. "You fear us." Walsh's recorded voice echoed through the archive. "Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we're different. You see warfare as a problem to be solved. We see it as a challenge to be embraced. You seek to eliminate variables. We thrive on them. You want everything to make sense. She smiled. We just want to dance." That speech, Xilax noted, his scales showing complex patterns of admiration and fear, crystallized the Council's understanding. Humans hadn't defeated the hegemony's fleet through superior technology or tactics. They had done it by approaching combat in a way that made traditional military doctrine meaningless. The displays showed the Council's final deliberation. The vote was unanimous. Humans would be banned from participating in galactic warfare. But the reasoning, classified until now, wasn't what most believed. The official story, Xilax explained, was that humans were too primitive for galactic combat. The truth was exactly opposite. Humans were too unpredictable, too creative, too willing to improvise. In short, too human. The professor brought up the final treaty signing. The human representatives, to everyone's surprise, seemed almost pleased with the arrangement. What no one realized, Xilax said, his scales rippling with irony, was that humans had achieved exactly what they wanted. By demonstrating their unique approach to warfare, they had secured their independence without having to actually fight. The ban meant no species would dare attack Earth, for fear of forcing humans to defend themselves creatively. He looked at his students, seeing understanding dawn in their various physiologies. And that, young ones, is why humans are banned from galactic warfare. Not because they're weak, but because they turned combat into an art form. Not because they're primitive, but because they made predictability obsolete. Not because they're inferior, but because they showed us that everything we thought we knew about warfare was merely one possibility among endless variations. Xilax's scales shifted to the deep crimson of final warning. Remember this lesson well. If you ever encounter humans in your future careers, remember, they're not banned from warfare because they're dangerous. They're banned because they made warfare itself dangerous in ways our civilizations had never imagined possible. The professor deactivated the displays for the final time. Class dismissed, and if you ever hear humans playing what they call jazz, his scales flickered with amused caution. Remember that you're not just hearing music. You're hearing the sound of chaos being transformed into art. And that, more than any weapon, is what makes humanity unique in the galaxy.